The wind howled over the black hills as dark clouds gathered in the sky. Lightning flashed above, but no one looked up. All eyes were fixed on the girl chained to the stone pillar in the center of the village square. Her hands were tied above her head, her legs bruised, blood on her skin. She did not cry. She did not scream. Her eyes were open, but empty. The villagers stood in a wide circle around her, holding stones. Their faces were angry, afraid, cold. The oldest among them, the village elder, raised a hand. "She is cursed," he shouted. "She brought sickness and fire. She must pay the price." Some in the crowd looked away, others nodded slowly. The girl said nothing. Her lips were cracked, her dress torn. Her name was Lissa. And this was the end of her story, or so they thought. A young boy threw the first stone. It hit her shoulder and she winced, but made no sound. Then came the second, the third. One struck her head, and blood trickled down her cheek. She still didn't cry. She simply stared forward as if already dead. Far away, beyond the forest, a human walked alone. His name was Cole, a traveler from Earth. His ship had crashed weeks ago, and he wandered the land, learning, surviving, searching for help. He heard the noise from the village, the shouting, the chanting. But then he heard something else, a sound that didn't belong, a cry, not of pain, but of silence, a kind of pain so deep it made no sound. His feet moved on their own, faster, toward the noise, toward the storm. Back in the village, the elder raised his hand once more. The final stone was large, sharp, deadly. He looked around, making sure no one would stop him. "Let her be forgotten," he said coldly. But just as he pulled his arm back to throw, a loud bang cut through the air. A gunshot, sharp and sudden. The stone dropped from his hand. The crowd turned and gasped. Standing at the edge of the square was a man they had never seen. He wore a torn black jacket, boots covered in mud. His eyes were hard, his hands steady, and in one hand he held a human weapon. "Step away," he said. His voice was calm, but full of warning. The villagers froze, not understanding the words, but they understood the tone. He walked slowly into the square, eyes locked on the chained girl. She looked up for the first time. Her vision was blurry, but she saw something strange in him, something different. He reached the pillar and looked up at her. For a moment, no one moved. Then he raised his other hand and gently touched the chains. The metal was old, the locks weak. With a few hits from his tool, the chains snapped. Her arms dropped down, too weak to hold. She collapsed, but he caught her. Gasps echoed through the crowd. No one had ever touched her without fear. And now this strange human held her like she was not cursed, but precious. He turned and walked back through the crowd. Still holding her, no one stopped him. They parted silently, unsure whether to run or kneel. As the storm broke above, rain poured down, washing blood from her face. She blinked, feeling warmth for the first time in days. Not from the rain, but from his arms. They disappeared into the forest, the crowd still frozen. A few villagers looked at each other, wondering if they had just made a mistake that could not be undone. But far above, hidden in the mountains, a pair of glowing red eyes watched the whole scene. The watcher touched a device and whispered, "The human has interfered. Phase 1 is broken." Deep in the forest, the human built a fire and wrapped her in a blanket. He gave her water. She drank slowly, her hands shaking. He didn't ask questions, didn't expect thanks. He just stayed close, silent but calm. She looked at him and tried to speak, but her voice cracked. Still, he smiled gently and said, "It's okay, you're safe now." For the first time, tears fell down her face. Not from pain, but from something forgotten, hope. That night, as she lay beside the fire, her eyes stayed open, watching him. She didn't know who he was, why he saved her, or what would happen next. But she knew one thing, this human had changed everything. The fire was dying, its last embers glowing softly in the dark forest. The girl lay still, wrapped in a blanket that was too thin for the cold. Her name was Lissa, and though her body was weak, her eyes remained open, watching the strange human who had saved her. He sat a little distance away, his back against a tree, resting but alert. She didn't understand him, and he didn't understand her, yet somehow, no words were needed. He had touched her without fear, broken her chains without asking who she was or what she had done. He had simply acted, and now everything was different. Far away, back in the village, the elder spoke in whispers. She escaped with the Skywalker. He said to the guards, "Find them, kill the outsider, and bring the cursed one back." The villagers nodded. Their fear stronger than their shame, Lissa tried to sit up, but her body screamed with pain. The human looked at her quickly, walked over, and gently helped her lean against a tree trunk. He offered her more water, then some kind of food wrapped in cloth. She took it slowly, unsure, but hunger won over fear. She pointed to herself and whispered, "Lissa." Her voice was like dry wind, but it carried something deep, something broken. The human looked at her and repeated softly, "Lissa." Then he pointed to himself, smiled slightly and said, "Cole." Their names hung in the air like a fragile truce between two lost worlds. As the night faded and morning light touched the trees, the forest changed, birds grew silent, wind shifted, and then came the sharp sound of movement. Cole stood quickly, his hand reaching for his weapon. Lissa's eyes widened. She recognized the sound too. They were being hunted, energy spears sliced through the trees, glowing blue as they hit the ground. Cole pushed Lissa behind a rock and opened fire. His weapon made a deep, cracking sound with each shot. Shadows moved through the trees, figures in black armor with glowing eyes. Lissa's heart raced. Her people had come not to rescue her, but to silence her. They still feared what she might become, even after chaining her, even after leaving her to die. One of the hunters shouted her name, not kindly but like a curse. Cole didn't understand the words, but he saw her face, pale with dread, and he knew these weren't friends. He kept shooting, moving fast between the trees, drawing fire away from her. He didn't care that they were aliens, didn't care about the odds. All he saw was someone who needed help, and he wasn't going to let her be taken again. Lissa looked down at her hands, trembling, weak, useless, but something inside her shifted, something old, something quiet. Like fire waiting for breath, she whispered a word, one she hadn't said in years, and her fingertips glowed faintly. A burst of light exploded near Cole, knocking him back. Lissa screamed, her voice cracking. The hunters moved in quickly, their weapons pointed at her now. But before they could grab her, the ground cracked beneath their feet. The glowing light from her fingers spread through the roots and stones, rising like vines, wrapping around the attackers' legs. They cried out, struggling to break free, but the forest itself seemed to hold them down. Cole got back on his feet, eyes wide at what he saw. Lissa stood shakily, her hands still glowing. Her voice was barely a whisper, but it carried power. One by one, the hunters fell unconscious, their minds overwhelmed by something ancient and unknown. The forest grew quiet again. Only the sound of leaves blowing in the wind remained. Lissa turned to Cole, tears in her eyes. She didn't know how or why the power had returned, but she knew one thing. It was because of him. He reached out and gently touched her shoulder. Not as a soldier, not as a savior, just as a man who refused to look away from suffering. Together, they disappeared deeper into the woods, knowing others would come, knowing the world would not let them go so easily. But the chains were broken now, and Lissa was no longer the girl on the pillar. She was something more, and someone had just made a very dangerous mistake by letting her live. The forest was quiet again, but it was not peace, it was the calm before the storm. Cole moved carefully through the trees, carrying Lissa in his arms. Her energy was spent, her glowing hands now dull and trembling. The fight had taken something out of her, something deep and hidden. He found a small cave under a ridge, hidden by thick vines and moss. Inside, it was dry and dark. The cave would not protect them for long. But for now, it was enough. He laid her down gently on a bed of leaves and broken cloth from his own pack. She opened her eyes slowly and whispered his name, Cole. It was the only thing she could say without pain. He gave her water again and sat beside her, his body tired, his mind racing. She had done something impossible. The forest had listened to her, had obeyed her. He didn't know how or why, but it saved them, and it terrified him. Lissa didn't sleep. She watched the cave entrance. Her fingers curled tight around a small rock. If they came again, she would fight. Even if it killed her, Cole didn't speak much, but she could see it in his eyes. He was thinking, planning. He was a soldier once. She could tell, not just by his gear, but by the way he never looked away from danger. She wanted to tell him everything. But her voice was weak, and the words in her mind were tangled like thorns. Still, she tried. She used her hands, drawing symbols in the dirt between them. Cole watched closely, confused at first. But then he saw it: a star, a tower, a chain, a flame. Her people had built towers across the lands long ago. They called them bindstones. Each tower had a core made of ancient metal, alive with energy from the planet itself. Those who were born different, those with the old power, were feared and chained to these stones. Lissa had been just a child when they took her. Her powers had awakened too early, and her village offered her up to the bindstone to avoid the wrath of their rulers. Her own father had turned his face away as they dragged her up the steps. Cole clenched his fists. He didn't understand all the symbols, but he understood betrayal. He had seen it before, on other planets, in other wars. As Lissa rested, Cole stepped outside the cave. The forest around them was dark now, not because of the night, but because something was coming. He saw black birds flying in strange patterns, circles above the trees. He turned back quickly and began packing. They couldn't stay here. Lissa stood up, still shaky but stronger than before. Her eyes were brighter now, as if a small fire had been lit inside her. She pointed east, toward the mountains, and Cole nodded. They moved fast through the trees, using the thick mist to hide. Behind them, the hunters were searching again, but not just soldiers now. Creatures had joined them, twisted things, half machine, half animal. One of them stepped on an old root, and it screamed under its weight. Cole turned and fired, dropping the creature with a clean shot, but the sound gave away their position. Lissa closed her eyes and whispered something in her ancient tongue. The mist thickened, turning the forest into a maze. The hunters shouted in fear, swinging blindly. Cole grabbed her hand and pulled her through the mist. Her skin was cold, but she didn't resist. They didn't stop running until they reached a high cliff where the trees thinned and the stars could be seen. From there, the path led to the ruins of an old tower, one of the bindstones. Broken and forgotten, Lissa stared at it for a long time. Her hands trembled again, not from fear, but from memory. She had seen this place before. In her dreams, in her pain. Cole stepped beside her, touching the broken stone with one hand. It hummed softly under his palm, as if still alive. She walked forward slowly and placed both hands on the stone. A pulse of energy moved through her. Her eyes closed, and the ground began to glow beneath her feet. Cole stepped back, unsure what was happening. Lissa whispered, "This was not where I was supposed to die," and the tower answered. Asterisk. The ground lit up under her bare feet, slow at first, then brighter, like stars waking from sleep. The stone around her pulsed with old power, and the air turned warm, even in the cold night. Cole stepped back, eyes wide, watching Lissa stand still like a statue. Her hands pressed against the broken bindstone, her hair floating as if the wind had forgotten its path. He had seen strange things on other planets. Ancient tech, strange life, even alien magic. But this was different. This wasn't science. It wasn't myth. It was something in between, alive, breathing, waiting. The old tower, once feared and left to rot, was not dead. It had been asleep. And Lissa had just called it awake. The carvings on the stone glowed blue and gold, lines stretching like veins into the earth, into the mountains, into something deeper. Lissa opened her eyes slowly, and they weren't the same anymore. The dull fear was gone, replaced by calm fire. She turned to Cole, breathing fast but no longer weak. "I remember," she said softly, the words rough but clear. "This is where it began." Cole walked toward her, careful. Not wanting to break the moment, she touched her chest, then the tower, and then the ground. Slowly she started to explain, using simple words and shapes in the dirt. Long ago, before her people feared the gifted, they worshipped them. The bindstones were not prisons, but gateways, places where chosen ones connected with the world's energy. They were protectors, not monsters. But time turned respect into fear, and fear into cruelty. Lissa had been born into a dying age. Her gift had come too early, and her people, afraid of old stories, locked her away. They called her cursed, chained her to the pillar, and waited for her to die. Cole listened in silence, piecing her words together. One thing was clear now: she was more than just a victim. She was connected to something ancient, something powerful. The tower's light faded slowly, leaving behind only a soft hum. Lissa fell to her knees, drained again. Cole caught her before she hit the ground. She looked up at him with tired eyes, but her voice was steady. "I'm not cursed," she whispered. "I was chosen." Cole looked out toward the mountains, trying to understand what it all meant, but they didn't have time for deep thoughts. Not now. In the distance, a low sound echoed through the valley, metal wheels grinding, heavy feet marching. They were coming again. Not just the hunters this time, but something bigger. Lissa looked toward the sound, and her face changed. She recognized it. Cole asked what it was. She answered with one word: enforcers. Machines built by her people long ago to protect the old ways, now used to kill anyone who threatened the false peace. Cole knew they had to move, but Lissa shook her head. "No more running," she said, her voice shaking with emotion. "I have to finish this." The tower gave off one final glow, and something rose from the base, a crystal, shaped like a flame. Lissa reached for it and held it close. Its light entered her skin, and for a moment, her whole body shimmered. Cole placed his hand on her shoulder. She looked at him, silent. "Their bond didn't need words," he said. "Then we finish it together." The ground began to shake, and trees fell in the distance. The enforcers were close now, maybe minutes away. Cole loaded his weapon, checked his gear, and stood tall. Lissa stood beside him, her dress torn, her arms thin, but her eyes full of fire. She wasn't just a girl anymore. She was a key to something lost, and the enemies knew it. She whispered, "They will try to end me," Cole replied. "Then they'll have to go through me first." And as the enforcers rose from the shadows of the trees, they stood side by side, ready to face fate not as prisoner and protector, but as equals. The earth cracked as metal giants stepped into the clearing. Their arms were made of steel, their heads shaped like sharp helmets, glowing with red light. Each step they took made the ground tremble. The enforcers had found them. Cole stood in front of Lissa, eyes locked on the machines. His gun felt small now, almost useless, but he didn't move. He wouldn't run, not now. Lissa had stopped running, and so had he. The enforcers spoke in a voice like thunder, cold and sharp. "Return. The marked one," they said, "or be erased." Lissa stepped forward, slow but steady. Her hands glowed faintly, and the flame-shaped crystal pulsed against her chest. The machines paused, as if they recognized her, as if something in their code still remembered the old laws. But then, the red light in their eyes flickered, and they raised their weapons. Cole aimed his gun and shouted, "Run!" But she didn't move. Instead, she placed a hand on his arm and said, "You should go, Cole. They came for me." He looked at her, hurt and angry. "And I came for you," he said. "I'm not leaving before she could reply." The enforcers opened fire. Bright beams of energy tore through the air. Cole pulled her down behind the ruined bindstone, chunks of rock flying around them. They were outmatched, too exposed. The tower wouldn't protect them for long, Lissa knew. And so did he. That's when she made her choice. She stood again, even as Cole tried to stop her. She walked out from behind the stone, hands raised, not in surrender, but in command. She shouted a word in her ancient tongue. One the machines had not heard in generations. The enforcers froze, confused. Sparks blinking from their heads, she shouted again, louder. Her voice echoed across the mountain, and this time, the crystal on her chest glowed bright. Cole watched, in disbelief as the energy from the bindstone surged around her, forming a circle of light beneath her feet. The forest around them went still, not from fear, but from respect. The machines tried to move, but their arms locked in place. Their red lights blinked rapidly. Then one by one, they fell to their knees, metal hands clutching the ground. Lissa whispered one final word, and their eyes went dark. Silence fell again, broken only by the wind. Cole stepped out slowly, still holding his weapon. He looked at the machines, now lifeless and cold. He turned to her, confused and amazed. "What did you do?" he asked. Lissa lowered her hands, breathing heavily. "I told them the truth," she said. "I used the command only a chosen one can use. I woke up what they forgot." But her legs gave out and she fell forward. Cole caught her again, gently lowering her to the ground. She looked up at him, her face pale, her eyes full of light. "I can't keep doing this," she said. "It takes too much from me." Cole didn't speak. He wrapped his jacket around her and looked at the bodies of the metal giants. They would not be the last. He knew that now she had power, yes, but she was still one girl, one voice. The world that wanted her dead would not stop here. That night, they hid inside the ruins of a collapsed tower. Lissa slept, her body weak, but her mind filled with visions. She saw faces, people like her, locked away, forgotten, still waiting. She whispered in her sleep, "There are others." Cole didn't know what that meant, but he sat beside her with his gun ready. Watching the trees, he didn't sleep, not even for a second. He had seen what she could do. He had seen what they were willing to do to stop her. He knew what was coming next, not just more machines, not just more hunters, but the ones who gave the orders, and when they came, Cole would be waiting. Lightning flashed over the broken mountains. As the storm returned, rain hit the rocks in hard slaps, soaking everything. Cole stood just outside the ruin, his back against the cold stone wall. His gun was heavy in his hands, his eyes locked on the narrow path leading up from the valley. Inside, Lissa stirred in her sleep, her face pale, sweat shining on her skin. She whispered names no one else could hear. Names of people long gone, names of places buried in time. The energy she had used to stop the enforcers had drained her. So, like a river pulled dry, Cole checked his gear again. He was tired too, tired of running, tired of fighting, but he wasn't going to leave her. Not now, not ever. Then the mountain shook, not from thunder, not from wind, but from footsteps, huge ones, slow and steady, like stone grinding against stone. Cole rushed back inside. Lissa opened her eyes at once. She had felt it too, not with her body but through the stone, through the earth itself. She sat up with effort, her voice barely more than a breath. "They've sent the Watcher." Cole frowned. "What is that?" he asked, her eyes filled with old fear. "The first of them, the one who guards the last gate. No one escapes it." Before Cole could ask more, the ruin began to collapse, dust falling from the ceiling, cracks crawling up the walls. They ran, Cole holding her close as they dodged falling stones. Outside, the sky turned red. A creature taller than any tree stepped into view. Its body looked like a statue carved from black stone. Its head was a mask of blades, and its arms were long, dragging two great swords behind it. Cole stopped breathing for a second. This wasn't like the enforcers. This was something older, something worse. Lissa touched the ground and whispered again. Her voice shook the trees, but the creature did not stop. It kept walking, straight toward them. She looked at Cole and said, "It doesn't follow commands. It only follows orders from the High Circle." Cole raised his weapon, but he knew it was pointless. Bullets would bounce off that thing like dust in the wind. The Watcher stopped only a few steps away. It raised its swords and crossed them in front of its chest. Then it knelt. Lissa gasped. Cole stepped in front of her protectively, but she put a hand on his shoulder. "It's waiting," she said. "It wants to test me." She stood, still weak, but burning with light from the crystal. The Watcher rose again and began to swing one sword slowly in the air, not to attack, but to challenge. It was a trial, a test to see if she was truly the chosen one, or just a spark in the dark. She stepped forward, her hands glowing, and the stone beneath her lifted like a platform. Cole wanted to stop her, but he knew this was her fight. The Watcher moved with heavy grace, its swords cutting the air like wind blades. Lissa dodged, barely keeping her balance. One mistake and she would be gone. She reached deep inside, calling the power not from the crystal, but from the ground, the sky, the ruin, even the broken bindstone behind them. The air shimmered around her hands, not with fire but memory. She wasn't fighting with strength. She was fighting with truth. She raised her hand and shouted an ancient name, one only the Watcher would know, a name from the first circle of the old world. The creature froze, its blades stopped mid-air. Then it dropped them and fell to one knee again. It placed one massive fist on the ground, and a circle of symbols spread across the mountain floor, glowing gold. Lissa stepped into the light, and it flowed into her like a flood. She didn't fall this time. She stood taller, her voice steadier, her body stronger. Cole walked to her slowly, unsure what had just happened. She looked at him and said, "I passed. The last gate is open now." Cole nodded. Even though he didn't fully understand, he only knew one thing. Whatever waited behind that final gate was what they had been moving toward all along, and they would face it together. The sun rose behind the broken mountains, but its light felt strange, not warm, not peaceful. It looked more like a warning, as if the sky itself knew what was coming. Lissa stood on a narrow cliff ledge, the wind blowing her hair back. Her eyes were clear, her steps strong. The trial had changed her. She was no longer just a girl who had been chained to die. She was something more, something forgotten and now reborn. Behind her, Cole stood with his weapon lowered, watching her carefully. He had followed her through storms, through death, through fire and darkness, and he would follow her into this final step too, even if it meant not returning. Below them, hidden inside the mountain, was the gate of judgment, the last secret, the last lie her people had buried. It was not a place of power, it was a prison for those like her. Lissa placed her hand on a flat stone, and the rock melted away like mist, revealing a long silent tunnel filled with glowing marks on the walls. As they stepped inside, the sound of the outside world disappeared. Only the beating of their hearts remained. Each step they took deeper into the mountain made the air feel heavier. Cole looked at Lissa and asked softly, "What's behind the gate?" She paused, then answered, "The others." He blinked. "Others like you?" She nodded. "They were locked away long ago because they were too strong, too different. I was supposed to join them, but I escaped." When they reached the heart of the mountain, the tunnel ended in front of a giant wall of black stone. No door, no lock, just smooth darkness. Lissa placed the flame-shaped crystal against the wall. A crack formed, spreading out like veins. The wall began to open. Inside the chamber was no throne, no treasure, only silence. And then they moved. Figures stood frozen inside glowing cages of energy. Men and women, old and young, faces still and eyes closed. Their bodies floated in stasis, breathing but trapped. Lissa stepped forward and whispered, "I'm sorry it took so long." The crystal flared in her hand, and the cages shattered like glass. One by one, the prisoners opened their eyes, confused, blinking, then realizing. They looked at her with wonder, with fear, with hope. A tall woman stepped forward, her voice rough. "Are you one of us?" Lissa nodded. "I am, and the world has changed." They turned to Cole, unsure, afraid. He raised his hand slowly, showing peace. Lissa said, "He's with me." That was enough. Together, they left the mountain, the light of day hitting their eyes like fire. Outside, the world had not waited. Dozens of ships hovered in the sky. Soldiers lined the ridges, weapons aimed. The high circle had come to finish what they started. Cole raised his weapon, ready to fight, but Lissa held up her hand. She walked forward alone, the others behind her. They didn't charge, they didn't scream. They walked like a storm. One of the high circle leaders shouted through a speaker. "Return to your prison or face death." Lissa raised her voice, not loud but sharp. "You kept us silent. You called us cursed, but we are the voice of this world." The sky cracked open as the mountain behind her lit up. Power rushed through the earth, through every tree, stone, and wind. The soldiers fell back, blinded, weapons failed, lights blinked out. The planet itself had chosen, and it chose her. The high circle ships retreated, not from fear, but from knowing they had already lost. When it was over, Lissa stood still in the wind, eyes closed, feeling everything. Cole walked up beside her and said, "So what now?" She smiled gently. "Now we rebuild." He nodded. "And I guess I stay." She looked at him, soft light in her eyes. "You broke my chains, Cole. I want you by my side when I break the rest." Together, they walked down the hill. Behind them, the freed ones followed. A girl once chained to a stone was now leading a world. And by her side stood the human who refused to let her be forgotten.